this one is the poopings. Okay, let's go over this. So let's talk about ZVT. Let's talk about Papa Avilo. So for people who don't know who Avilo is, he's a mech streamer. He's been streaming for quite a few years now. He's in the Masters 1 to GM range. And one thing that's interesting about his approach is he very rarely follows the meta of what some common Terran timings are against Zerg, or when bio is popular, going bio. He's kind of always looked to pave his own way in terms of approaching the matchups and stuff. And I think there's some allure to that. Like Ruff does that as well, where he's not just copying what the pros are doing in GSL. He's kind of thinking about his own unique way to approach the game. So how does Papa Avilo approach the game? He's got a barracks, he's got SCVs, he's got the basic early stuff that everyone gets. When does it get different? I would say the main difference in his approach to Terran versus Zerg is that he scouts the third with his SCV. He scouts the opening build. So he's scouting. He sees a hatch first. He sees a hatch gas pool. Amazing. Wow, look at that hatch gas pool. This is the most standard Zerg build too. So he scouts, I'm going the most standard Zerg build. And then he keeps the SCV at the third base. So what does this say about his approach to the game? This says that he is planning to get ahead, or he wants to get ahead, in the 3 to 4 base to 5 base stage of the game, and is willing to sacrifice mining time and fall behind in the 1 to 2 base stage. Workers mine at a rate of 1 mineral per second, so if he's keeping his SCV at the third base, he's missing out on this SCV earning him money in the main or the natural during this time. So that's a unique decision that he makes that some might argue is not the best decision, because the Reaper's going across the map anyway, but it is what it is. Some people like to do that. So I made a mistake here. I sent my drone over to the third a little bit too late, and the SCV was kind of blocking it anyway, so I end up losing a drone to this Reaper. That's a bummer. But he also loses his SCV to my Lings, and those are both hallmarks of this is an NA level game. This is not Korean pros duking it out, fighting super fast and doing all the amazing things. We kind of go, whoops, make some mistakes here and there. And that's how it goes. That's okay. We can still have fun playing StarCraft. So now what's going on? Hellions and a starport. Another hallmark of his approach to the game is that he tends to play very defensively. So instead of aggressively committing units, aside from his Reaper, this is another side note, the Reaper always dies. His Reaper always dies. He doesn't care. He'll just send it in, get a scout, and then just let it resign itself to its fate. It's very tragic. I wish he would save his Reaper. If you save the Reaper, you can use that for more attacks, or you can put it at the opponent's fourth base. It's a 50-50 mineral and gas investment, so just keeping that alive would really take his skill up a notch or two. So I'm going for a Bane Nest. I'm actually following Lambo's build. Lambo did a really good guide on an Overlord speed opening in ZVT, where you can get a really thorough scout. So what did I do? Overlord speed, and I scouted his opening. Hellions, and then Starport, and a Barracks. He's going mech. It's no secret. He always goes mech. So the Viking kills this Overlord, but the Overlord did his job. Awesome. Queens are going down here. Like I was saying in the game with Henkon we just saw, Queens anchor the newest base. So if I have 4 Queens, they're anchoring the new base, and I have more Queens being made in the main, and there's a Queen in the natural. I'm going for lair first. Tech generally is more important than upgrades against mech, especially if you're against a bunch of Hellbats early or Cyclones and stuff. It's better to have Morling Bane, and then if you're against Banshee, it's good to have access to Hydras or Mutas if you want to do that. So a really cool decision that he tends to make here is to not attack with his units. Some players would make an armory, they would bring their Viking, and they would do a timing here. I've actually died to this a couple times, where they go for these Hellions, 2 Cyclones, and the Viking and the Reaper, and they take a trade here at the third base. But what does Avilo do? He sits. He sits at home where it's safe, so he can do his next thing. This is a missed opportunity, right? Because I'm pretty low on units. I have Queens, and I have Lingbane, but I don't have a Roach Warren, and a lot of Zerg players will kind of toe the line of how much can I possibly drone here without dying. And if you never attack, then you never get to figure out what that area is. It's true that it's a risk to go and take a trade. Maybe the Zerg is going for an all-in, and you get caught on the map and die. That could be a bad thing. The flip side is, if you don't represent your value, then the opponent can get away with a lot of economy growth. So what do we see here? We see a lot of resources in the bank. This is a very crucial time to be spending your money. And currently he's very supply blocked, and he's only making a command center. So let's actually get an instant replay of this supply block. How long did this supply block last? Supply blocks I would describe as quiet mistakes that you make in StarCraft. They're not noisy like a tank blowing up a base or banelings crashing into something. It's a very subtle mistake where the announcer says, hey, you're supply blocked, but you don't really get immediately punished for it. It's one of those things where your growth is just stopped for a little bit. So let's see. 65 out of 70, and he can't really make too much. He's making one battlecruiser. It's around 5 minutes 20. And when does he get his supply ceiling raised? It's 5:20. Still not making supply. Okay, there we go. So this was around a, 30-second supply block? Where he could have been making some more expensive mech units and stuff. But he's just supply blocked. And that's a bummer. But that happens to all of us. I get supply blocked sometimes. But it's one of those mistakes that you forget about. Whenever you're at the end of the game and you're kind of explaining to your chat like how things went, why you won or why you lost, you tend to forget the early game supply block. So I challenge you, if you lost a game, try to find the first supply block or two and take note of when that happened. Because moving forward, you can say, all right, I tend to forget the 31 Overlord a lot of the time because the first Reaper is kind of harassing me around that time, or the first two Hellions. So just extra mental note, the next ZVT 32 Overlord, for Avilo it could be, all right, around 60 supply, I need to make a couple depots because that's when a lot of my infrastructure is ready to be put down and stuff, and I want to make my next Starport Tech Lab unit. And I want to keep making workers. So he's making 5 factories. He's 11 workers behind, though. And these units haven't done anything the entire game. They actually killed some destructible plates next to the natural, which I wasn't going to exploit against him anyway. So he has a battlecruiser here, but it can't do anything because they're made queens, because queens are the kind of multi-purpose defensive unit. If you're trying to make a bunch of drones leading into the mid-game and late game, having around 7 queens is a really good number. I made around 6. There's the 7th queen live now. And usually that's going to be 4 queens that are on creep spread duty and also defending some harass, and then 3 queens that are injecting. So I'm going double Evo here. Does he have upgrades? He has a single armory, but he hasn't used it at all. And this is 8 minutes into the game. So if we're thinking about the momentum of once you establish the facility that can make upgrades, you immediately start them. And then as soon as one upgrade is done, you immediately start the next one. If his plan is to have a big, fancy, maxed out army, upgrades are super important. So the earlier you can get those started, the better. And we have another supply block here at 117, which is highly unfortunate. Mech units take up a lot of supply. It can be kind of surprising, but look. A Thor is 6 supply. That's almost a full depot by itself. A tank is 3 supply. Cyclones are 3, mines are 2, Hellions are 2, and Hellbites are 2. So supply management is a really big deal in powering into the mid-game. Because we can watch the growth here. It's true that Zerg should grow a little bit faster than Terran and Protoss, just because their bases are a little bit cheaper and they can hit 70 workers faster. But it is a race, and you want to do it as fast as you can. I'm about to be supply blocked here, I think. Production. Yep. So I'm blocked at around 145. Which is not the worst, because I have my economy size that I want. I have 74 workers against 59. And I can make Banes. So this supply block is less of an issue than an early game supply block, but it still is a mistake. So I should watch out for that. Whenever my 3 base saturation is reached and I'm getting my first max out, I want to make sure I make like 5 to 6 overlords. So this is an interesting choice to move across the map here. Mech units are very value dense, and generally you want to keep them alive, but he has a lot of Hellbats and Widow Mines here, which could be pretty good if I attack all up this ramp. But I have creep all around the ramp, so I have options. I can attack over here, and over here. So this is where it gets a little bit intense. Before, it was just a passive macro power-up game. But a lot of times, one player in the power-up stage, when not much is happening, one player just gets ahead. So this is a game state where I'm ahead, leading into this fight. So if he wants to analyze his game, he should think about, how do I get to the 10-minute mark in a way that I'm not behind? Because he's behind now. He's behind in upgrades. He's only finishing his +1 now. My 2-2 is on the way. He does have a good position here. And his composition is pretty respectable. He's got mines and cyclones and tanks and stuff. Where's the 4th? Okay. This would be a really good opportunity to take a 4th because he's holding an aggressive position. He's moved forward on the map. He's contesting my creep. And he has a big amount of stuff that's kind of rallied by this 4th base location. So for him to take a 4th behind this would be really good. And you can imagine too, let's imagine he didn't get supply blocked at 70. He didn't get supply blocked at 117. He managed the supply really smoothly. He might have 185 supply now instead, if that was a more crisp kind of transition. And he might also have his +1 done. He might even be working on +2 if the armory was researching something as soon as it was done. So this fight, leading into it, there are a lot of tools that could have been added to this equation that are not there. And those are really independent of balance. It's more about management of your stuff. The stuff that depends on the turn. The player, not the race. So this is just a well-rounded Zerg army with 1-1 fighting against a well-rounded Terran army with no upgrades. The upgrade did finish during the fight, but that's not really ideal. And now Terran is faced with a really big problem because it takes longer to build mech units than it takes to build Hydraling Bane. So he's kind of frantically trying to remax, and he didn't take a base behind it. He could have even built the command center here. But the main base is mining out, Terran mules. So their bases are depleted of resources faster than Zerg and Protoss bases. So that 4th base needs to come down really, really fast. And I think it was an awesome opportunity. When he was going for that attack, he could have taken the 4th behind it. So Hellions try to do something. But now it's kind of the situation where he's basically dead. And any analysis beyond this point is kind of like, how do you make the most of a bad situation? As opposed to, what were the more crucial mistakes? The more crucial mistakes already happened. Like, it would be good to see more upgrades taken from the armory. But yeah, the vast majority of this was mismanagement of the supply depots early and being blocked, and then not capitalizing on your upgrades over time. So he just went into the fight with inferior upgrades, and then missing an opportunity to get that 4th base online whenever his army was forward on the map. But aside from that, like, his strength as a player is he has a really good sense of good army compositions. At the 200 supply amount, he has a good idea of a nice group of units that have synergy with each other that can do well against a lot of things. That's partly why he doesn't really scout or harass very much, is because he prefers to say, all right, I'm going to assume that the opponent is going to play well and make a bunch of stuff, and I want to make a bunch of stuff that's better than the stuff they can make by my knowledge of compositions. So that's his kind of knowledge over time of playing a lot of StarCraft and RTS, where he tries to take the advantage just by making a better quality army. But a big problem there is there's no upgrade. So he has +1 versus, what, +3 armor Zerg and +2 range attack. So I'm just kind of moving up the chain where I had Hydraling Bane Swarm Host, and now I have Ultra Hydra Viper, and I split between the paths, they're Blinding Clouds, and then it kind of plays itself out. So if he focused on the Blinding Clouds, that's totally missing the entire reason that he lost. The Blinding Clouds had almost nothing to do with it. That was just like the finishing move that I chose, but I didn't need to choose Vipers. I could have had a couple more Ultras, or I could have Knight Slings into the main. The player who's very far ahead has tons of options. So it wasn't really about Vipers, it wasn't about Hydras, it wasn't about Swarm Hosts. It was mainly about powering up to a big economy, taking consistent upgrades, having consistent production and supply management, and then representing a good engagement with the good army. And then he just went AFK and left the game. So that was basically it. Burp, burp, burp. Hydras. Amazing. I think they have 3-3. No, they have 2-3. There you go. Why do you go Ultra